Okay, we are now recording. Welcome everyone to the, I always have to look at the date, March 24th iteration of the MicroProfile live Hangout, Working Group Edition. So today's entire agenda is going to be dedicated to the working group discussion, and a link to the notes are in the chat. If someone wants to paste them again, that would be awesome. And it is, let's see, if you're on the call, please go to the meeting minutes and add yourself as a contributor to the meeting. Organization is optional. And let's see, all the chat contents will also be saved, so just be aware of that. And it is everyone's shared responsibility to take notes. So please, please help me out and take notes during the call. Okay. I posted yesterday to the Google group to take a look at Mike Milinkovich's umbrella working group proposal. I hope everyone has had a chance to do that. I know we're all pretty busy.
No,
and,
I didn't.
Yeah. And if there's any other agenda items, feel free to add those as well. Related to the working group. All right, so I'm going to kind of step back and see if anyone has feedback on the working group proposal. And if we don't have any, I think maybe what we'll do is just go on pause for 5 or 10 minutes and just let people read it so we can start getting some feedback. So I'm gonna step back here and go on mute for a little bit.
Well, I've
mind putting the chat, putting the link of the meeting minutes to the chat?
Sure, it's also in the
in the invite.
Meeting minutes should be okay. I'll paste it again. Copy, and hopefully that's right. There you go. And there's a link to the working group proposal in the meeting minutes. So I'm going to step back. I think somebody was going to speak.
Yeah, this is Scott. Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I've added several comments to it because I've gone through it. I mean, basically, this is yet another variation of combination of MicroProfile working group versus Jakarta working group versus single working group. And I mean, I understand some of the perspective of what it's trying to accomplish, but to me, it seems even more complicated than any proposal to date. So I'm not sure. I don't know. It's definitely not a step in the direction I would want to move. I mean, there's some things relative to having the notion of an umbrella type of technical alignment and maybe some way for companies to join multiple working groups at one time. That's fine, but introducing yet another steering committee and pushing budgets up to the top level is just too complicated and obscures to me the point of an individual working group for me to be supportive of it.
Okay, I apologize for interrupting here. I know I was going to try and step back, but Scott, what I have, I apologize, I forgot to share the screen here. Let me share my browser. What I pointed to was the Google Group version that Mike pasted in. Do you have a link to the actual, I think it was a Google Doc, right, as well? Or did you comment on the thread?
Yeah, no, I went on the Google Doc.
Okay, can you paste a link to that?
I'll post it here.
All right, thank you. All right, I shall go back to the background again. Let's see, actually, before I do that.
Did it.
Okay, awesome. And okay, nothing compromising this time in my screen sharing, it looks like. Looks like I got the right thing. And let me zoom in so everyone can see. And I will, thanks Martin, copy the link and paste that in here. Okay, I'll go ahead and step back to the background here a little bit while others continue to comment. Thanks for pasting that link.
I guess I'll just generally say that, Scott, what you said reflects, you know, a lot of what we think. In particular, really the most desirable outcome for us. And we don't have a problem with the concept of there being like a work group that encompasses or an alliance of some regard, but the budget should be in the individual working groups, so we can decide which ones we want to participate in and pay for the ones that we want to pay for, and know that the budget is going to the working groups that we want to participate in.
Yep.
So those are the primary needs for us, and there's not much else to comment on until that's resolved.
So I haven't seen it clearly. I don't know. I did see the email come in.
And I super apologize for interrupting, Amelia. David, can you do me a favor or Scott, paste this into the meeting minutes as kind of being one of those things, just so it's there in the meeting minutes. I appreciate that. Go ahead, Amelia.
No, so I saw something that Mike sent, but I haven't been able to look at it. It wasn't sent late last week, so it's the weekend. So based on Scott's differentiation and then David, so are we talking about, again, we go by pay to play? Is that correct? About when I hear about budget, let's talk about budget. This is something so important. We, from the start, have decided, and we decided when launching MicroProfile, that we would be the minimal cost. That means if a company joins, they can choose their resources. There is no mandatory, you need 3, 4, 5, 6 committers. And anything that will resemble anything similar to Jakarta will kill the project itself. And let me just be clear here. Please don't cut it. We'll deter those that are already telling us via private, and a few of them are already going to the Jakarta community and saying, why would I pay Eclipse Foundation to hire people to work in open source when I cannot even hire it for myself, or I cannot dictate what those human resources would do for the project that compiles or that assembles onto my needs as an employer. And I continue to hear this, and I continue to hear this, and I continue to hear this. This is one of the most important topics that this community, that this ecosystem needs to discuss in this call and the future calls. Are we going to allow for this to happen? And are we okay to pay or demand the pay to play? Everyone is so coy sometimes to be trust, wait and see. Why is this? And something that bothers me a little bit is that we always put aside the cost. Anything that needs to talk about a working group within open source needs to be open, discuss. I need to know if I was a newcomer, a committer, or a contributor, or a potential company. I would want to know how we handle situations like this when we are being told we should do X or Y, and we have all this difference. We have a proposal created by a few of us that is fantastic, that it protects us, protects the IP, protects this. We have withdrawn one of the proposals and we have a new proposal. I don't see any issues with us talking directly about income and saying, hey, what are we going to do? Is it one pay? Is it two pays? I mean, this is so easy to talk, but everyone deviates, or most of us deviates because it's uncomfortable. Why is this? Can we just discuss before we go into more detail? And thank you so much for listening.
I think I read this proposal before the meeting. I think I must have understood it differently from what Scott had said. I mean, to answer what Amelia, your question, I don't think this worker group, I mean, trying to to do any closed door conversation. I don't think this is trying to defeat any openness, culture, and etc. Let me see what's my understanding. For this one, if I understand correctly, the umbrella worker group basically is just like, you would say, structure and no real power. And for the fee and etc. and the whatever the Jakarta currently require the members to pay, so basically that's a applicable for this universal work group. So so basically, once you join this universal work group, and then you can participate in Jakarta, in MicroProfile, and all the real power held by the individual like worker groups. This is my understanding. It is not. This is not. I mean, convinced or or I got it completely wrong.
Oh,
Well, it's not correct from the perspective of you have to pay the fees at the UWG level, and you have to join that. You can't join, for example, a MicroProfile working group solely, and then only deal with that fee structure, for example. So it is
fee,
basically pulling up a fee structure from the most expensive group to the top level, and then the budget is pushed down to working groups from there.
So basically,
I'm going to paste it. I apologize for interrupting here. Just I've been editing a little bit, and so in the meeting notes, you should see a link to what the Jakarta EE member fees are, as well as in the prospectus, there's a definition of what each of these levels provides. So somewhere in here. The one thing I will point out, I think what Scott's trying to say, for instance, if a large corporation wants to join just for one working group project, let's say Acme Corporation would like to join just for MicroProfile or just for one of the other working groups that is not Jakarta, their starting point is $300,000, right? So I think, is that correct, Scott? Is that the point that you're trying to make? Okay. Yeah. All right, now, sorry to interrupt. I'm going to give the floor back to Emily.
Okay, so further this question, now is if you join like $300,000, what about in the new structure? How much does it cost?
That's the same thing, Emily.
Yeah. So that's
currently it's zero cost to join the MicroProfile. So this would make it cost $300,000 where it doesn't currently cost.
Oh, I see. I see.
Right?
So basically,
it's really difficult to argue that that's not a big change.
Right, I see. So it's for the people for the companies or members already on Jakarta EE is kind of no change. But for someone just like interested in MicroProfile, they have to pay for it. Oh, I see.
Even companies that are still on, that are already on Jakarta EE, there is still a change, right? So, I don't have to worry about financial obligations to MicroProfile to continue to contribute in MicroProfile in a way that I'm not disadvantaged. So that was a long sentence, but on the Jakarta EE side of the fence, I know that if I don't pay, I don't get top billing and I don't get a lot of benefits. And then I know that competition gets those benefits, and it will be more difficult for me to compete against them with them getting the benefits and me not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's fine. We knew that we're making that choice. We feel it's worth it for Jakarta EE, but we bootstrapped MicroProfile together with everybody else as an open source community, and it isn't our intent that dynamic play out in MicroProfile, that if we don't pay, we lose voting access.
Yeah.
And that there be things tied to the payment, like logo usage and other things like that. So
just since Bill is typing in the chat already, so just kind of, Mike was not able to attend the call today, but he is more than happy to attend the call next week. Just to put it out on the table, because I agree, maybe some additional clarification is needed, and there is a strong recommendation, of course, for people to go over the document. But let's say, for example, in this particular situation, would Tommy Tribe pay anything else if MicroProfile and Jakarta EE would go under the umbrella working group? I don't think so. I don't think that's what this proposal is saying.
Okay, you guys keep saying that statement. It's not about, is there an additional cost to join this?
Nope.
It's, if I'm recruiting new people, what is the
Exactly.
cost?
So I didn't finish, Scott, but yes, if there is someone brand new, if there is an interest for a corporation or individual to join the umbrella working group, there would be associated cost depending on, you know, the revenue and everything else that you already know.
Yeah, so just to address, the statement of there's no cost, so why the concern? There's no additional cost to you, so why the concern? There is a control concern here. If we expand the scope of the umbrella working group and we don't expand the budget, then over time, the individual projects will get less and less budget because we'll be dividing it amongst more projects. So now, if we do expand the budget, we're not necessarily, over time, we're not necessarily going to want to participate in all of the projects. And so then there starts to become concerns about, yes, the majority decided to vote to increase the fees because we have these big important initiatives, but what if we are not on board with those new initiatives and we have no intentions of participating in those working groups? Let's imagine a scenario where over time, we are only interested in half of the working groups that are under the umbrella. We have concerns that the projects that we do want to participate in are not getting funded well, and the budget is going to the newer, bigger initiatives. What would we do about that? We're not really in any position to decommit it financially in any way, because we would suddenly lose access to everything. And it would be very difficult to be in a position where we, one day we're considered among the top echelon of working groups A and B, but we don't have any interest in C and D, and we know all the money's going there, and we can't really do anything about it, because if we decommit financially from the umbrella, we're going to lose access to everything, and that's not good for our business. So more than likely, we would be forced to just continue paying, even though none of this stuff isn't going the way we want it to go. We won't have anything we can do about it. We're potentially in the minority on all these votes, and so we basically just have to tough it out.
So I'm going to give a kind of an example. Imagine if there's a couple of or a few other Eclipse projects, right, that are in this sphere, right, that we all work in. OpenJ9, and maybe Jetty. I think there's one called Gmo, right? Imagine that, you have a bunch of vendors, let's just say hardware vendors that are interested in optimizing OpenJ9 for their architecture, and they join the umbrella working group, right? But that's all they're interested in, right? But really what they're doing is they're funding all these other potential projects that they may not be interested in, right? And these could be very large companies, right? So they would fall in at the very top level of pricing. So, and they would have influence over things like MicroProfile and Jakarta.
And that changes the dynamics of the votes too.
Yeah, and that changes the dynamics of votes. It changes it in terms of, at the umbrella working group level, there's a steering committee. And one of the things the steering committee is going to do is decide who is able to join the umbrella working group, right? And so just over time, I just see the whole thing getting diluted, which is not diluted, sorry, diluted, where it just becomes, I think the big fear is in some ways like the JCP all over again, where it just tries to address every single concern.
Well, for me, it's just an unnecessary combination of issues. So again, I think your example points out the most natural point of entry for a vendor to define what his funding level is a product, which is most closely associated with the working group. The umbrella working group is really just yet another level of branding. So to me, that's another level of branding that's trying to pull together related brands, but so any budget should be related to that. It shouldn't be related to the working groups and have anything to do with the working groups. Working groups should define their budgets and fees, and if there's an umbrella working group that makes some sense and wants its own brand, then that's another level of stuff. But honestly, that's just a complexity that I don't think is necessary. I mean, we're so far beyond the initial problem we were trying to address with a working group, namely IP flow, that it just doesn't make sense for me. I mean, so to be clear, there are ways that you can participate in a specification project of a working group for no money, but you're not getting full access to the various steering committees and budgets, marketing and all that. So I just think this is unnecessary. I mean, I think it's more straight for conversation to have is, should there be a single working group, or should there be separate working groups?
Right.
And then on top of that, you can define technical alignment as yet another issue.
So Scott,
go ahead, Kevin.
yeah. So just wanted to point out, Scott, and I, not to derail your conversation here, but you do realize that Mike actually put in this umbrella working group based on your comments from before. So it is kind of ironic that somewhere he misinterpreted your comments, and he thought that he was addressing your concerns from before. Yeah,
I know. I'd mentioned there should be a working group, but it really was strictly basically a technological architecture alignment. Yep. It certainly was not going to foist up budget and also try and unify, the IP capture. I mean, I understand that Eclipse has an issue with document management, IP capture management. But to me, I don't see that this is that simple a solution for that. So, and again, that can be handled independently. I mean, you would have basically an umbrella participation agreement that could be applied to any subset of working groups that decide they want to have a shared consortium. And, you don't need a steering committee, you don't need a budget across them to do that.
Yeah.
One thing I would say is that it is already the case that you have to be a paying member of the Eclipse Foundation in order to be on any working group. And so that is, in my mind, already a perfectly fine umbrella.
Yeah.
It's like, to me, that sounds like, it feels like the federal government, and each working group feels like a state. There's a budget for the state, there's a budget for the federal level, and everything's fine. So to me, legally and financially, that arrangement feels fine.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like the problem's already solved. Now, in terms of if there needs to be some sort of market understanding that some working groups are aligned, okay, maybe we make an cloud native federation of working groups or something like that. But again, I don't want to do anything that would push the budget of all the working groups up to one monolithic working group that is a take it or leave it proposition.
Yeah, that would kill MicroProfile and any other project. Let me, okay.
Yeah.
So Cesar, you're here and you were writing something super important, but I do not know why you are not speaking. Is that?
I'd like to add, I wanted to finish the thought there. So if we were to have any sort of alliance of working groups or federation of working groups, my preference would be that the working groups would have the ability to decide whether or not they want to be in it on a regular basis. So if they simply don't want to be in the alliance or the umbrella, they could vote to say, yeah, we don't want to be in the umbrella anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I want to point out, so let's rewind. The Jakarta EE, most of the 6 partners that signed the contract, that we signed it for 3 years. It ends, the obligation to pay each year ends on December 2021. If there are no new strategic members coming in, and if we move to decide that MicroProfile and Jakarta will be under the same group, if any one of those working on the Jakarta project group decide to leave, but they are still working on MicroProfile, then they might only want to work on MicroProfile. They might be still forced to pay for that fee, even though they're no longer interested. This is a, you know, this is something that the community should know. The contract goes for 3 years. So what happens, like David mentioned and Scott had mentioned, where we or someone might leave, but is forced to stay because of the other thing. I believe, and early on months ago, I think January, one of the first things we talked about is giving the people, the users, and also the potential new partners, the opportunity to pick and choose and be able to withdraw sometime if they have to, but come back with minimum entry. If we make MicroProfile a part of something of a bigger whole because we think it's better and cool, or whatever the excuses, we might find for the opportunity cost to be that great. What happened with the newcomers? The confusing point now is I am already getting bombarded for a year and a half on how is the Jakarta budget getting distributed? And we don't have the transparency. The only transparency there is on that side of the fence is the minutes from July and August, when the working group was getting work out the budget in 2018. I have the hardest time telling a small company, a medium company, a $1 billion company, why it's worth it for them to join the Jakarta project. I created a Git issue asking for transparency. If we're not using the budget, at least the percentages, so that everyone knows what goes to marketing, what goes to legal, what goes to infra, what goes to hiring people. There is no transparency in Jakarta, and we think that we will bring in the budget side, and we think we're going to put any project like MicroProfile under that system. It's impossible. We have an issue that we need to fix in the Jakarta side, that is transparency in budget. And I'm telling you this because even when I was at the Nexus just now, I was being asked, what about X? And I can't give that information because it's likely we will be sued, right? I can only provide what is available, publicly available. When we talk about budget for MicroProfile, I agree that if you are a company, you already paid to be a part of the Eclipse Foundation. Why are we making the complexity to ask for extra pay to play for MicroProfile? I would prefer for us to work on the proposal that we have worked on, the other one. Clearly, this one needs to be reviewed again and again and pros and cons. But I like that if you join, it's like maybe $5,000, and then the committers will become a committers after they have done the work, and then that's it. It's just like a flawless thing. It's just saying this out of frustration and the level that there is no transparency on the budget side. It has caused me enormous amount of problems with people that will want to join, even committers or contributors, because there is no transparency. And that is a serious issue. Okay. That's it. Okay.
So are there any other voices that haven't had a chance to speak up yet, that, any other folks that would like to?
Yeah, this is Ken here. There's something I wanted to add. Part of me wonders whether we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in some respects. And what I mean by that is that we know MicroProfile needs a working group to solve the IP flow issue. We now have 2 proposals on the table, both of which have MicroProfile having a working group. So why don't we just create a working group for MicroProfile and then worry about anything else as to whether there's an umbrella working group, whether there's technical alignment groups or anything else once there's a working group? Because I fear that delaying any kind of decision and solving that gap is just going to put MicroProfile in a worse place. And if all options mean MicroProfile needs a working group, why don't we just do that?
Yep.
I thought we had the working group already.
Hold on. I think that's a very valid statement. I feel like you're the guy who just said the emperor is not wearing any clothes. Well, maybe
Yeah,
that's not the right
it's kind of like
analogy,
we seem to be rabbit holing on something that if all options lead to a working group, we don't need to solve right now. Let's just do the working group.
Yes, and
I would
I mean,
support
what you just said just makes perfect sense. And actually, that's part of what the MicroProfile. I shouldn't say but the proposal for doing the separate working groups. That's what we were going at from the very beginning. Is let's just keep them separate. Let's create them. We got a separate working group, and let's move forward with that, and then figure out the possible convergence down the road.
Class 1. I thought we had that in effect, actually, with the proposal already in place with a bunch of years.
I was trying not to show bias with my comments.
So let's. Oh, sorry. Any other new voices?
Let's just pick.
Okay. One. So, well, I don't want to put anyone, because they may not have had a chance to read it yet. Yeah. So, so maybe, so I put down, this may not be the right word. I put down preference to create a MicroProfile working group first. I'm going to say idea, I guess, to create a MicroProfile working group first. And, maybe this becomes, the next vote that we take, right? But we have to have a definition of what that is, that working group. So we could, all dust off our original proposal that's still in GitHub, and make any modifications to it that we deem necessary, and then submit that as a proposal. That's a step.
So
Love that.
for the oh, sorry.
I was just going to ask what is going to be a decision-making process. Are you guys going to use the voting with committers, or would you consider having a Q&A with Mike next week, or like anything a little bit beyond this in terms of closing up the topic?
Oh yeah, we're far from closing the topic. I don't want to imply that at all, Tanja.
Okay.
Because we still have to go back and dust off and our old verbiage and get comments on it. I mean, that'll take, I don't know how long, hopefully not too long. Definitely want to have Mike's input before we would ever vote on anything. I think the vote would, like the last vote, have binding votes for committers, non-binding votes for community. This is my perspective, right? I think, blind voting is a topic that we can discuss. Bill brought that up in, I don't know, the last call maybe, or the call before. I think that's a good topic to discuss, whether or not, the voting process itself. So we have, I don't know what the time frame is, at least a month ahead of us before we'd ever get to a vote.
Yeah, and I want to add that when we are done with the review of the working group single handling for MicroProfile, I think we should invite Mike for the full hour, because half an hour will not be enough. So next week is too early, Tanja, but we will email you or let you know when that happens, because we need to have that touched. We haven't been working on it for 2 months because we were focusing on the votes that we just did 2 weeks ago. But next week is too early. So FYI.
Well, yeah. So
I don't know if it is.
Yeah.
The only question I have is a half hour enough time, right? Because we typically only allow a half hour.
It's not.
Yeah,
So,
but it's another point is also kind of to focus the questions. I mean, it seems to me, and excuse me, maybe I'm misinterpreting here, but the key bottleneck is the budget and sharing the budget, and so it seems to me that we can kind of focus the discussion on just a couple of points, right? And if that's an obstacle, I think there is almost no conversation. I'm not sure that this is a long debate. But absolutely, I will convey the message, or whatever you think works the best.
So it's almost worth flipping it on its head, though. It gets back to a comment that was made earlier, I think, by Ken, right? It's are we trying to plug the holes in the umbrella working group, or is it really is a working group trying to solve problems that we don't think MicroProfile has? The problem we have is the IP gap.
Yes.
Right, that's my concern. Right now, the problem is the IP flow. We solve that with a working group. It doesn't matter whether 2 years down the road, whether that means there's 3 layers of working groups above us, but right now we just need a working group for MicroProfile. Let's solve that and fix everything else after.
And again, can we decide in this call to just drop anything that has to do with complexity, like Ken said, and super nice statement, Ken, because it totally ground us back to the problem that we started to work on back in December. And that is just create a working group for MicroProfile and drop everything else. This is ruthless and this is awesome. And I say +1, which means,
I think
ruthless is stupid.
Yeah,
I love it.
Hold on. So when we were mixing in the technical alignment and every single topic, we got nowhere on this for a very long time.
Yep.
Right? We didn't get anywhere.
I was frustrated almost every call, so I don't want to be frustrated.
Be able to finish what I'm saying. So we didn't get any traction at all. We didn't come closer after several meetings. There was no clear way to even get anything agreed upon. And when we carved out the technical aspect of it, that really helped. And so I would love to talk about the umbrella working group and have a focused conversation about fees and all sorts of things like that. But I agree with Ken that the original ask was to create a working group for MicroProfile to address the IP gap. All proposals involve a working group for MicroProfile. So we agree and we should execute that. And then we can have the second conversation or the third conversation without the variable of what the MicroProfile working group would look like hanging over us.
And I will just say,
let John get some words in.
I just had one quick comment. We've got 20 minutes. I want to reserve the last 5 minutes for next steps, so we have about 15 minutes of conversation. So that's just a time check. Thanks.
So originally, when we trying to discuss like our own worker group or the Jakarta worker group, and now it's that Jakarta worker group has become the universal worker group. So if we do the vote, right? If we do the vote, I mean, what kind of message we are going to do? We are going to send? Are we just saying, okay, are you agree or not? We want to create a MicroProfile worker group without saying anything about universal worker group and etc. etc. And then this is the first question. The other question is what kind of process we want to use when we create a MicroProfile worker group.
Well, we would probably, okay, I'm speaking for myself because obviously that's a conversation for all of us to have of how we wanted to do it. But in my mind, what we would do is we would use these time slots to talk about what we think a MicroProfile working group would look like and come to some basic agreement. And ideally, there aren't multiple proposals, but if there are, that's fine. We would end up voting for the MicroProfile working group proposal that everybody likes.
Yeah,
so
I guess from my perspective, I would say we probably don't need to vote on whether we have one because we all know we need a working group. I think the vote is purely around what the working group is.
Yeah,
correct.
We don't have a choice in whether or not we create a MicroProfile working group or a working group for MicroProfile, and there are no longer any proposals on the table that would be a single working group across everything.
Yes.
Right. So
MicroProfile working group in all proposals. So that's not something we need to.
Okay, so is like currently, not currently, in the past, like Scott created the like Scott and others create like a separate work group and also the fee structure and etc. Do you want to revisit that? And then it's kind of proofread it and then put up for the vote, or what else we
I
need
think
to?
what Scott created previously would be the straw man that we start discussions around to then
Right.
get general agreement on and then put that to a vote. And whether
Okay.
that means there's one document that we're all just basically giving a yes or no on, or whether there's a couple of proposals because there couldn't be agreement about specific points, we'll have to wait and see on that.
Right.
And one of the coolest things is that we already have the document. And my recommendation, even though it's not 5 minutes, John, before it, is for us to use every working call in the future to work on that document and change it while the conversations go live. We have discovered that through the forum, when someone sends comments, but they don't use the document, it gets complicated because we miss a match. And then the feedback gets diluted and lost. And there are projections. We need to avoid projecting onto others what we think, and we should own it directly and with the PRs and with the issues. I know it's complicated for many to use the issues to send recommendations on what to adjust, but one of the coolest things is that every issue gets reviewed by different microprofilers. And I think we must suffer through that and use, we need to decide in this call, hopefully, how to proceed, because it's too hard to ask John or Kevin or someone else to be the secretaries. And we all know how to use each issues and PRs. And if we do not, we learn, right?
Anyway, so we know we're going to be bringing up that document on this call, and there's a lot of stuff in there in terms of how we're going to handle voting, how many open committer seats will there be in comparison to corporate seats, and how do we handle meetings, and are they going to be open or private? Will we have many committees or just one committee for everything? How are we going to handle logo usage? All sorts of things like that. So it's probably going to be a bit of time for us to go through all of that.
Yeah, the other thing is we can establish our worker group. Is there any guidance? I thought there's a Eclipse Foundation guidance. So for the worker group we established, and probably has to be comply with that kind of the overall Eclipse Foundation working group, like a guidance or etc. Right?
There are working groups that do things very differently from each other, and ultimately each of those working groups, which were different from the other, they go up to the board for a vote, and the board decides whether or not that's something that the Eclipse Foundation wants to be, and and so that's the process. So ultimately we should make the proposal that we think is the right one, and if it's different than other working groups, that's okay. Ultimately the board would say, this is good or this is not good, and give us feedback as to why it is not good if it's not good, and then we would address it.
And one of the coolest things is that Eclipse Foundation has more than 360 projects. And we need to remember that the individuality of each single project and the people working on them, and it's very hard for a committer or contributor to work in like 6 different projects, but there are. And the diversity and the ecosystems from one project to the next is beautiful. It's refreshing. So I have heard that, it depends on how freely the contributions can go into one project, what drives that project itself. This is something we need to remember, because it's not only the companies, but also the contributors. They come on board, those ones finishing universities, those ones considering maybe getting a job in Java or something related. What voice we want to, this is like about education, explaining the why it's worth it to become a contributor of MicroProfile. Thus far, we have the most exciting, one of the most exciting ecosystems where everyone can join and submit a blog and just send a PR, and it's just so fun to just decide to learn and to contribute and write an ebook, or we have such a good ecosystem. Like it's not that I am protective of change. On the contrary, so we change, we should remember what has worked. When we decided that we will move MicroProfile to the Eclipse Foundation, we did our homework because we discovered that this will be the best umbrella, not to manage us, but to protect the current contributors and the future contributors and users. If there is a deviation from this reality, we will discover it soon enough because we're talking about it. So what I'm talking about is, let's be kind, let's work on that document, let's use the tools at hand under the Eclipse Foundation that provides Gits and in issues, and let's have fun at this. It's not complicated. What makes it complicated is our biases, and those are the things that we don't see. So I'm pretty excited, and I have no problem calling bullshit when I see it. So let's do that the same. I believe that is important,
right,
that we call ourselves too.
So, all right, so it sounds like we want to, dust it off. I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of GitHub issues and trying to use it that way.
I know.
There's so much to be discussed. I mean, we really need to go over it on this call. And yeah, we can use lists and other things to keep that conversation going, but we know we're going to be talking about it verbally.
This goal, yeah.
So that's one thing that we can do is maybe, it's only a half hour next week, but we could try and start the conversation, dust off the prior one, have the conversation around it, and then the following week, have Mike come on when it's a full hour, and discuss it. The two approaches.
I'd almost, that is one option. The other option is we could have a regular MicroProfile call next week and just go the full hour and dust off this in a full hour.
So
we need to be careful with that.
Over the next week would be 2 hours.
Yeah. I think.
Well, I don't mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean that we have a 2 hour call next week. I mean, next week we just have a regular call.
Okay, so when are you proposing that we would just have a full meeting on dusting this off?
Topic on a full meeting the week after, because
okay.
I think opening this in a half an hour is gonna backfire on us. When we tried to open the technical conversation in that half an hour, it was a disaster. I mean, we survived it. It was okay, but it didn't go well. And I think it would be difficult to open up the can of worms and all the topics of the working group without a full hour to get somewhere, to at least get a good overview of everything and discussion about how we want to continue. And
so you mean not the next week, but the next one, full hour, and then next week we do like the community with marketing and miscellaneous and all these things, David?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, that's an option. It's an option. I'm just putting it out there, right? So that way we have a full hour to open the topic up of the MicroProfile working group proposal and go over it with justice. Otherwise, we're going to have a conversation that kind of cuts in the middle and won't make sense, and it might end negatively.
Well, we could also cut next meeting short on the normal live hangout. Make it, 5 or 10 minutes on release, on the 4.x release, and then just go straight into the working group discussion.
Why don't we take a break, actually? Yeah, but why don't we take a break from working group conversations next call?
No. That's the opposite of what John suggested. I would be happy with that. My concern is more about trying to open the topic up in a half an hour. Right? I don't think we're going to get there. I don't, especially if Mike's on the call, we'll be talking about the umbrella working group. So it won't be a conversation about
right.
But we already said that we don't want to discuss that.
I was to say, do we need to talk about the umbrella working group
We
right now?
don't have to discuss about. We we don't need Mike because we will not talk about that. We decided a moment ago that we will on the working.
This is an open forum, and one of the benefits of an open forum is that anybody can join at any time.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I definitely like to hear Mike's perspective on the umbrella working group, right? I think it's important that we, hear out the proposal from Mike's perspective. As definitely before we go vote. It doesn't mean that we can't do, dust off our proposal.
Well,
but we
from
definitely
my perspective, they're
need to
kind
hear
of
from Mike.
orthogonal because we need the working group. Whether a UWG happens at some point doesn't change the fact we need a working group.
Yeah. Why don't we prioritize?
I'm fine with us hearing what Mike has to say about the UWG, but that shouldn't stop us dusting off the MicroProfile working group process, steering committee, all that kind of stuff, because we still need to get that resolved.
Correct.
Now, granted, some things will change if there's a UWG, potentially around finances and stuff and budget, depending on how things end up playing out. But I'd rather have a working group in place and then adjust it if we need to based on a UWG than delay having any working group even longer.
Plus one.
So what I'm thinking, if we hear what Mike says, and maybe we disagree with the UWG, at least we worked out, what kind of structure acceptable for our MicroProfile worker group. And then we don't go to one direction, and then later on we find out after chat with the Mike is we have done the wrong thing. That's my only concern. The other thing is what I'm thinking, for next week, why don't we move the MP 4.0 conversation asynchronously? Basically, we do the email conversation and then make the next week a full hour dedicated to the work group.
So Emily, let me catch you there. And you're awesome, by the way. I like that you're like Y, and Z. So
thank you.
My assumption. This is my assumption. I am assuming that the 360 projects in Eclipse have been asked to work under a working group. It's not only MicroProfile. And this is my assumption.
No. That is for specs need to work under a working group.
Okay.
So anyone that has a spec.
Yeah, that is what I mean. Okay. Good. Okay, so IPIs. Okay, we're talking about specifications. So if you have a specification because of IP gaps, you need to do this. So not only us, but many others are doing this kind of homework. And can you imagine how much stamina and power would be taking away from Eclipse? So they have to be handpicking and helping every single project of the many that have IP. So that is impossible, Emily. We need to proceed what we know, what we know. When we're unsure, we must ask, and this is easy, invite 15 minutes and ask the questions, or we send a note and directly to anyone that is not private, to the Eclipse, usually Tanja, or there are so many that will know the answer, hopefully, and get back. We cannot wait and see and continue to be, what is it called? Stop ourselves from proceeding. I agree with Ken that we should establish a working group just for MicroProfile and figure out what comes next. These calls are public, so anyone can come and explain why and see, but that shouldn't deviate from us moving towards what we agree that is the most fundamental thing that we should focus.
We can start from today to create a worker group asynchronous. We don't need to delay, wait for the meeting and etc. Just beef up the proposal.
Well,
so I think it's
that's you're right. We can start today. We've already worked on that based upon direct requests to do so.
Yeah.
And so there is something there for us to start with. And
all right.
So
let's dust it off. We've got, I'll shorten the agenda for next week on non-working group issues. Let's see if we can spend a good 50 minutes on the working group next week. on the standalone working group next week. Whether it's standalone or part of the umbrella, to Ken's point, is a very good point, right? There are still things we have to figure out.
Yeah.
So let's work on that next week. In between, we should do the dusting off. So I'll see if I can pull a thread together in the Google group to begin that dusting off, I guess. Then maybe in 2 weeks, we kind of have Mike come in, and where we have a full hour and we can chat about the two proposals.
My only concern is that at the very beginning, and I think it was Bill that put the comment in, is that there was a concern that we misunderstood the proposal. Now, I don't think we have, but there was a concern. And the idea was, okay, let's get Mike in here to explain it, to make sure that we're on the right page. So I'm concerned about pushing that conversation off while we're off going on a working group proposal that we think is the right way to go, when maybe there is something that we misunderstood. I don't think we did, but maybe we did.
I think Ken's point is, even under the umbrella working group, we have to define MicroProfile working group.
Oh, right. But then how far do we take that?
Well, we only got 2 weeks.
Yeah,
the pace we work.
We are giving ourselves the time. I think 2 weeks is too short to tell you.
No, hold on. I think we just time box ourselves and we get as far as we can, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So
that way we're not going, we're not going way off the rails, but we are being more prepared.
Yeah.
Because what I see, some of the differences is there's a top level working group and the umbrella working group. There's a budgeting aspect. There's going to be some brand and logo things that are going to be involved there as well. If there's things that we can do that kind of circumvent that in preparing, for a standalone working group like spec process that we haven't really kind of dusted off and done work with. Those are some things that we can do, and then give Mike a full hour. To Kevin's point, okay, that's option one. Option two, to Ken's point, is next week we do a 10-minute or whatever it takes, 5 or 10 minutes to do a 4.0 status, and then Mike gets the rest. Mike can come on next week if he's available. I'm okay with either approach.
Actually, I agree with Kevin. The having Mike on the call, I mean, it's not a contradiction with what we are doing anyway. So we can still do our own thing. We just ask him some questions, and then if it's kind of 40 minutes cannot be sorted, and then we have a following week to do more conversation, and then I think get us all engaged, and then just trying to get this work group business sorted. So basically, I think now we have pressure. We need to, before the next week, we need to work on this work group proposal, not put in the back burner again. That's my thinking. But anyway, so that's over.
Level 2, I have a sharp call right now. So do we talk next week for 15 minutes on this? What do we do?
All right. I'm okay. Tanja, why don't you see what Mike's availability is for next week, and see if we can pull him in. And if not, then we'll just.
I know what is Mike's availability next week. So he is available next week.
Okay.
I already talked to him about it.
Okay.
So that's why I suggested. I don't know about the week after.
Okay.
He was busy today, but that's why he didn't join. But that's why we're trying to kind of time it. So, but whatever you decide, I will go back to him and ask him. I just know that he's available next week.
So I'll tell you what, I'm gonna, because we're already over. I'm gonna, I guess, as the call moderator, so you can beat me up if you want to. Have Mike on next week. In the meantime, during the week, we can dust off the working group proposal, standalone one. Work on the parts that we got to work on, regardless of which approach is taken. And then for the following hour-long working group meeting, we can kind of continue the discussion, I guess, depending on what happens next week.
If we were to do that, then I would probably recommend that we do our regular half hour and then do the half hour for the umbrella specifically.
Okay.
Delay the MicroProfile working group for the next week because we need a full hour for that.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
My thing is I don't want to crack that open in a half an hour, and I don't want to crack it open after we've had a bunch of other off the rails conversations.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want a
All right.
calm start to that.
Okay, so let's do 15 minutes, or just have Mike join 15 minutes in, maybe. Just because we don't know exactly if the agenda is short.
Well, even if he joins on top of the hour, it doesn't matter.
He can do
right?
that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I was just trying to be respectful of his time. So if he wants to join the top of the hour, we'll just have our normal meeting. At the bottom of the hour, we'll discuss the working group and get clarifications. I do think that we should all comment on that working group document before then, the umbrella working group proposal he's got on the doc itself or in the Google group thread. And so he can come in and clarify anything that he wants to clarify.
That sounds wonderful, actually.
Okay.
And this, John, please, whenever you are done with the recording, when you retweet, remember to add the MicroProfile so we know it can be retweeted. You always do, but this one is super important because not only Mike, but everyone else that might join that call needs to hear this call. I think this one is just a revamp onto focus conversation on the project itself.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining. We will see everyone in 1 week. Same bat time, same bat channel.
Bye, everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.